Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the wild, reckless days of the Roaring Twenties, an era of flappers, jazz, prohibition, and an addiction so potent, so all-consuming, that it nearly took down American families from coast to coast. No, it's not bathtub gin, not cigarettes, or opium, or even unfiltered jazz. We're talking about a forgotten habit more insidious than midnight fridge raids, and more devastating than your third cup of decaf. An addiction that gripped the nation tighter than a Model T on black ice. But before we spiral into this fever dream of tweed, tedium, and trembling hands, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of historical nonsense. Leave a comment and tell me, what's the weirdest family tradition you've ever survived? Bonus points if it involves Jell-O or an emergency fruitcake. Now, dim the lights, flip on a fan for that soft white noise, tuck yourself in, and make sure your phone is as far away from your pillow as American morals were from actual morals in the 1920s. Let's pause for a moment. Could you survive a 1920s household where the greatest threat wasn't jazz, but a board game? Would you recognize the symptoms of full-blown Monopoly mania before it took your loved ones? Could you keep a straight face as Aunt Mildred hocked the family silver to pay off her hotel debts on Baltic Avenue? What really happened when Prohibition killed off everyone's second favorite addiction? Did Americans just get bored? Or did they replace it with something even worse? Would you last a night in a house where family fun meant 8 hours of ruthless, soul-destroying competition, stacks of pastel play money, and a heated argument about whether Uncle Earl gets to be the thimble? Or would you, too, fall victim to the forgotten 1920s addiction that nearly destroyed American families? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1927. Your radio is blasting jazz, your bathtub is suspiciously clean, and your entire family is gathered around the table, eyes wild, knuckles white, Monopoly board at the ready. Good luck. You shuffle out of bed, only to discover your entire family waiting, wide-eyed and desperate, for your arrival. The dining table, once a safe haven for ham and Jell-O, now groans under the weight of a brand-new pastel-colored menace. Welcome to Family Game Night, America's latest obsession, and the only thing standing between you and social exile. Let's set the scene. It's 1927. The radio is hissing out jazz in the corner. Dad's side part is sharper than his opinions. And everyone in this house has been dry for 7 years. Prohibition is in full swing, and the only buzz you're catching is from inhaling too much lemon pledge. But something is stirring in the hearts of American families. A need for distraction, drama, and a socially acceptable way to threaten your siblings with bankruptcy before bedtime. Family Game Night is the new ritual. It arrives with all the subtlety of a brass marching band at a funeral. No one is sure who invented it, but you're fairly certain it was a committee of exhausted mothers looking for an excuse to sit down. Gone are the quiet evenings of needlepoint and quietly resenting each other from opposite ends of the parlor. Now, every Thursday, you are conscripted into the sacred tournament of dice, play money, and manufactured joy. You take your seat, trying to recall when the table stopped being a place for meals and started being a battleground. The air smells of desperation, yesterday's cabbage, and the slightly burnt aroma of hope. Your older brother is already stacking the play money, lips pursed in anticipation. Grandma, who once swore she'd never stoop to frivolous entertainment, is examining the rules like she's prepping for a Senate hearing. There are only 2 moods at Family Game Night, deadly serious and suspiciously cheerful. Dad tries to keep things light. It's just for fun, kids. But his eyes flick nervously between Baltic Avenue and the kitchen, where Mom sharpens her pencil like a prison shiv. There's a new energy in the air, and it's equal parts excitement and low-level dread. You're not sure if you're meant to enjoy this or merely survive it. The rules are presented like sacred law, handed down from Parker Brothers on a stone tablet. No one reads them all. Instead, your uncle, visiting for the weekend and already regretting it, explains the basics. You buy, you sell, you try not to go to jail. That's it. But even as you begin, alliances are forming and enemies are made. Your little sister picks the iron, a bold move, while your cousin grabs the race car and immediately claims immunity from rent because it's fast. Already chaos. With each roll of the dice, you learn that family game night is less about entertainment and more about exposure. Every hidden rivalry, every ancient grudge, every argument about who broke the porch swing in 25, now dragged out into the open, cloaked in the safe anonymity of gameplay. Mom accuses Grandma of hoarding $500 bills. Grandma reminds everyone who paid for the Thanksgiving turkey. Your brother starts dealing under the table, trading Boardwalk for a week of dish duty. Modern fun this is not. There are no screens, no save points, and no pause for bathroom breaks. If you leave the table, you risk missing your chance to bribe, betray, or gloat. Hunger is secondary. Thirst is irrelevant. The game must go on until someone cries, flips the board, or Dad declares enough and retreats to the garage to count screws. If you think group therapy is a modern invention, you've never watched a family of 8 argue over the proper way to calculate luxury tax. As the night goes on, you begin to understand why family game night caught on. In a world where everything from the news to your dinner could give you indigestion, the illusion of control, even over pastel-colored cardboard squares, was intoxicating. Here, in the flickering glow of the dining room light, you could go from pauper to property mogul in the time it takes to pass go. You could bankrupt your siblings and still share a bed with them later, under the uneasy truce of a cold morning. Eventually, the game ends, not with a winner, but with a collective sigh and the gentle clatter of game pieces being swept into the box. Tomorrow, you'll all pretend to forget who owes who what, and family game night will fade back into legend until next Thursday, when the call of the dice is simply too loud to resist. Welcome to America's new addiction. Hope you brought a good attitude and a strong stomach. The board itself is a battlefield, pastel properties, railroads no one actually understands, stacks of fake cash begging to be embezzled. In the center, a tiny metal thimble taunts you with promises of fleeting prosperity. You don't own property in real life, but here, you're about to mortgage your dignity. Let's talk about your new reality. There's no seat at this table, only territories to conquer. The board stretches out like a technicolor map of broken dreams, Park Place glaring at you from across the sea of orange, the utilities daring you to pretend you understand how electricity works. Everything is for sale, and the only law is chaos. You pick your token, a decision that feels weightier than selecting a career or naming your firstborn. The thimble? Protective? Ironic. The boot? Aggressive. The race car? Pure fantasy, since your real car is still in the shop waiting for the one mechanic in town who doesn't believe in spare parts. You settle on the top hat, determined to channel the financial savvy of someone who's read the business section at least once. Hope is alive. It won't last. Your first roll is full of optimism and the faint smell of old carpet. Maybe you land on Reading Railroad, a purchase so confusing no one questions it. Perhaps you hit income tax and begin your night by paying a bill to an imaginary government that somehow feels as painful as the real thing. Already the seeds of rivalry are planted. Who buys what? Who hesitates? Who immediately makes a generous offer for Marvin Gardens because it's a sleeper hit? Trust me. As you advance around the board, the monopoly economy comes alive. Money flows, trickles, from player to player. Each transaction is watched with the intensity of a Wall Street trading floor and the morality of a Wild West poker game. There's always that one family member who seems to understand the rules a little too well, buying up orange properties and quietly building their empire while the rest of you bicker over who gets to be banker. Spoiler: Never let your little brother be banker. He will rob you, and you will respect his hustle. Let's talk about the properties. Baltic Avenue, purple and perpetually undervalued, becomes the site of a cutthroat land war between two cousins. Boardwalk and Park Place are the stuff of legend, rarely purchased without backroom deals and a threat or two about inheritance. The railroads are owned by an aunt who keeps announcing, "Trains are the future," despite all evidence to the contrary. The water works? Nobody knows. But it must be important because someone always buys it early and then forgets to charge rent. Every turn is a masterclass in negotiation and self-sabotage. Someone trades all 4 railroads for a single orange property, swayed by the promise of future glory. Another person starts a bidding war over street, James Place, because, deep down, everyone wants to live in a neighborhood with a name that sounds fancy. House rules emerge from the primordial ooze. Do you get money for landing on free parking? Or is that a lie invented by bored parents? No one knows. Arguments are inevitable, and by hour 2, even the family dog has picked a side. Meanwhile, the tiny metal thimble, the humblest of tokens, starts to haunt you. Every time it passes go, you imagine it whispering, "You're one bad trade away from sleeping in the garden." It's a reminder. No one is safe. Luck can turn with a roll, and the next time you draw a chance card, it might send you straight to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $100. Try not to weep. As hotels begin sprouting like mushrooms, the stakes climb, houses are built, fortunes made and lost. And you realize that Monopoly has stopped being a game and become a full-contact sport without the safety equipment. There are tears, accusations, and at least one person who needs a break and is never seen again until breakfast. At the end of the night, when the board is a ruin of tiny red hotels and crushed dreams, you remember the board was never your friend. It just watched, silently, as you mortgaged your future, your relationships, and, if you're unlucky, your last ounce of self-respect, and still you'll come back for more. Because deep down, you believe that next time, the thimble will be lucky. Or at the very least, you won't land on Boardwalk with 3 hotels. Good luck, you'll need it. Forget fun. These rules are a 16-page novella designed to destroy families. As you fumble through instructions, everyone around you slowly turns from loving relative to corporate raider. No one knows if the free parking cash pile is official, but no one cares. The descent begins. The Monopoly Rulebook. A document so dense and contradictory, it could have been written by a committee of over-caffeinated tax accountants in a room with no ventilation. It arrives folded, yellowed, and already torn at the corner. The font is smaller than your chances of winning, and there are diagrams that seem to reference a board you do not possess. Someone tries to read aloud, but the words mortgage, unimproved properties, and bankruptcy immediately shatter the family's collective patience. No one knows who the original author was, possibly a bored lawyer, possibly a sleep-deprived parent. All you know is that every sentence leads to a new question, and every answer sparks a fresh argument. Can I buy property if I'm in jail? How much do I actually owe if I land on someone's hotel with 3 houses and a small loan from Aunt Edna? Is auctioning mandatory, or just a threat? The rules do not clarify. They only taunt. You realize Monopoly isn't a board game, it's an IQ test, a stress test, and a marriage counselor all in one. As you try to decipher the flowchart of doom in the centerfold, your family starts muttering. Grandma claims she remembers the original way to play, which seems to involve more physical violence and fewer chance cards. Dad insists on strict interpretation. If the rules say pay $75, you pay $75, no exceptions. Your brother, meanwhile, is Googling how to win at Monopoly in the hope that someone online knows the answer. Spoiler, no one does. Within minutes, the room divides into factions. Rule purists versus house rule revolutionaries. The purists want to follow every arcane instruction. The revolutionaries just want to get to the part where they can build hotels on their enemies' hopes and dreams. The first civil war of the evening erupts over free parking. Does money from taxes go there, or is that a lie invented by Dad to speed things up? Soon, side deals emerge. Someone slips an extra 50 under the table, and suddenly the banker's honesty is up for debate. You didn't realize a board game could trigger a congressional hearing, but here you are, 3 turns in, already considering legal representation. The rules, of course, aren't just long, they're aggressively vague. If 2 players land on the same property in 1 turn, the property is auctioned at the banker's discretion. What does banker's discretion even mean? The banker is a 9-year-old with chocolate on his fingers and a tendency to shout, "Mine," at random intervals. Auctions become a free-for-all. Someone tries to pay in raisins. Another offers to do your chores for a week in exchange for the orange set. The family cat wanders off in protest. If Monopoly's goal is to simulate the wild unpredictability of American capitalism, the original rules are its purest expression. Nothing is certain except confusion and emotional devastation. The community chest is a grab bag of disappointment. Sometimes you win a beauty contest you didn't enter. Sometimes you're fined for stupidity, which feels a little too on the nose after the 3rd rereading of Section 7. Subsection D. Advance to go. Go directly to jail. Collect $200. Do not pass go. It all starts to sound less like instructions and more like existential threats. The longer the night goes on, the less anyone cares about the actual rules. House rules emerge organically. If you roll doubles, you get an extra turn. Unless you're in jail, in which case you have to bribe the banker with a cookie. Anyone who lands on the luxury tax space must wear the top hat and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. If the game goes past midnight, all debts are forgiven and everyone gets to eat the thimble. By this point, the thimble is missing, the banker is asleep, and the game has devolved into a heated debate about whether property trading is allowed if you're not technically conscious. By the end of the night, you've learned that Monopoly isn't just a game, it's a microcosm of family chaos. The rules are just the first domino to fall. The real game is surviving the arguments, the side deals, and the creeping suspicion that you might actually prefer a quiet game of chess with a cat who cheats less. Good luck enforcing the rules next week. No one remembers them anyway. With booze outlawed, America needs a new vice. Enter board games. The absence of whiskey only sharpens the competitive edge. And nothing says family bonding like threatening to flip the table because someone forgot to pay rent on Street James Place. Picture yourself in 1925. The government has dumped every bottle of gin in the river. The saloon is now a soda fountain. And your parents have replaced their secret flask with a deck of cards and a stack of crisp Monopoly bills. The nation's thirst has not disappeared. It's simply changed flavors. Now, instead of a secret sip of bathtub gin, Americans crave the adrenaline rush of bankrupting their in-laws before dessert. Prohibition is supposed to bring order, morality, and a good night's sleep to American homes. Instead, it delivers chaos wrapped in cardboard. In towns from Boston to Boise, families sit down each night, looking for something, anything, to fill the void left by whiskey, wine, and warm lager. And so, America discovers the most dangerous cocktail of all, a board game, a belligerent uncle, and an endless supply of time. You too are swept up in this new craze. What begins as just a quick game after supper transforms into a multi-hour battle of wills, luck, and questionable accounting. Without the soft haze of alcohol to blur the edges, every decision is laser sharp. Who gets to be banker? Why is your sister always the first to buy Boardwalk? Where did all the $5 bills go? And why is Grandpa sweating? The national mood changes. Instead of dancing in speakeasies, Americans now pace in their parlors, plotting their next move on Baltic Avenue. You thought your mother's glare at the dinner table was intimidating. Wait until she lands 3 hotels on Illinois and demands payment in front of the whole family. The stakes feel higher than ever, even though the currency is as fake as your cousin's loan from the bank. Suddenly, game night is the new wild party. The Victrola scratches out some peppy jazz, the clock ticks, and the room heats up, not from the radiators, but from sheer, unfiltered competition. Dad tries to keep things civil, but everyone knows civility is the first casualty. It doesn't take long before alliances form, bribes are offered, and a forbidden stash of raisins becomes the prize in a desperate trade for Pacific Avenue. You realize the genius of Prohibition wasn't just about outlawing alcohol, it was about forcing America to invent a new reason to argue. Before, a squabble could be soothed with a round of drinks and a raucous sing-along. Now, the wounds run deeper. No one ever woke up with a hangover from too much rye whiskey and wondered if they still had a house on Marvin Gardens. But after a night of Monopoly, you question everything. Your family ties, your own judgment, and the mysterious disappearance of the thimble. With every roll of the dice, Prohibition exposes something raw and hilarious about the American spirit. We need to compete. We need to scheme. We need something, anything to get riled up about. When the bars closed and the jugs went dry, the family table became the new arena, less sticky than a tavern, but twice as cutthroat. The winner gets bragging rights and the best slice of pie. The loser gets to tell the story for years. By midnight, no one misses the whiskey. Not really. The laughter is louder, the arguments more memorable, and the sense of occasion, strangely, feels even more intoxicating. You're making history in your own living room, discovering that the need for excitement doesn't disappear just because the liquor does. And so, Prohibition transforms America, not by making it more sober, but by inventing a whole new way to get drunk on competition, family drama, and the sheer madness of trying to win at Monopoly. Congratulations, you've survived another night of manufactured fun, and you did it stone-cold sober, mostly. Just don't ask what's really in Grandma's teacup. It starts small. Maybe an extra game after dinner. Maybe an argument about the exact exchange rate between Boardwalk and your sister's silence. Before you know it, you're eyeing your grandmother's poker face with suspicion and hiding $5 bills in your sock. At first, Monopoly is a novelty, a gentle break from the monotony of 1920s life, one step above synchronized napping and 2 steps below reading the dictionary for fun. The family tells themselves it's just a game, it's educational, it builds character, but as the weeks tick by and the dog begins twitching at the sound of dice, you notice a new energy has infected the household. Every night, the clatter of play money and the rattle of tokens echoes from the dining room long after the sun sets. Dinner conversations get shorter, more clipped. Nobody wants to waste precious minutes they could be spending building a tiny hotel empire or plotting sweet vengeance. You spot the changes first in the little things. Your father, who once polished his shoes for fun, now hovers near the Monopoly board, planning strategies with the intensity of a stockbroker before Black Tuesday. He starts reading the rulebook by oil lamp, occasionally muttering, "This is it, tonight, I'm getting Boardwalk." Your mother, previously the embodiment of calm, suddenly develops an uncanny ability to track every transaction and side deal. She takes up knitting, just so she can watch everyone's hands for sneaky moves. There are whispered conversations in the hallway about property swaps and alliances. Your older brother starts keeping a Monopoly ledger, filled with notes on past betrayals, rent histories, and who owes him what from 3 games ago. The phrase "it's just a game" is now met with nervous laughter and a change of subject. Even Grandma, sweet and serene, is somehow always first in line to choose a token. No one questions it. No one dares. The symptoms worsen with time. Your little sister, master of the puppy dog eyes, leverages her cuteness for immunity from rent, at least until she starts winning, and then she becomes a tiny, unstoppable landlord, evicting family members with merciless glee. Your uncle, usually the peacekeeper, now has a running tally of everyone's net worth scribbled on the back of his checkbook. The dog sits in the corner, chewing on the iron token and probably plotting a takeover of his own. You catch yourself developing monopoly paranoia. Is that your mum's emergency cash stash, or is she skimming from the bank? Why does Grandpa always insist on sitting closest to the banker? You start hiding your big bills in your sock, just in case. Someone swaps the community chest cards for fun. No one laughs. Your cousin invents elaborate strategies that involve bribery, emotional manipulation, and at least one threatened exile from the dinner table. A simple family tradition becomes a ritual with sacred rules and superstitions. The thimble must always be facing north. The dice have to be blown on before each roll. If anyone says easy win, the game must immediately restart. And a slice of pie is offered as a peace treaty. Neighbors are invited, just to witness the spectacle or to serve as neutral referees when someone inevitably tries to buy their way out of jail with leftover meatloaf. It all seems harmless, until the night nobody wants to stop. The clock strikes midnight. Dad is down to his last $5 bill. Your sister's empire stretches from Pacific to North Carolina. Mom has barricaded herself behind a fortress of yellow deeds. You're exhausted, hungry, and vaguely aware that you haven't blinked in several hours. Someone utters, "Just one more game?" And everyone nods, grim, determined, a little afraid of what happens when the board is finally put away. That's when you realize the truth. Monopoly is no longer a pastime, it's a household epidemic. There are no winners, only survivors, and the slow, creeping suspicion that your family will never be the same. But hey, at least nobody's fighting over the last bottle of gin anymore. Now they're fighting over Marvin Gardens, which feels like progress or possibly the beginning of the end. The Victrola scratches out a jazz record, while dice bounce off the linoleum like thunder. Someone's yelling, someone else is weeping, and Grandpa is calculating interest rates at a speed that would frighten any bank teller. This is not a game, this is war. If you were hoping family game night would be a wholesome, musical interlude, a scene straight from a Norman Rockwell painting, think again. This is the Roaring Twenties, and even in the safety of your own living room, chaos reigns. Jazz crackles through the air, lively and frenetic, underscoring every heated argument and every emotional breakdown. The saxophone wails, the clarinet dances, and someone's Aunt Edna is muttering about the youth these days between rounds of brutal rent collection. The symphony of Monopoly is a thing all its own. There's the steady click of dice as they clatter and bounce, each roll promising either salvation or doom. There's the slap of play money hitting the table, sometimes gentle, more often with the force of someone making a point. Occasionally, the money doesn't just slap, it soars as bills are hurled in protest or despair, fluttering to the floor like confetti at a parade of broken dreams. Amid the chaos, tempers flare. The polite mask of familial civility drops the moment someone builds a third hotel on Boardwalk. What was once background music turns into a full-blown soundtrack for psychological warfare. Siblings bicker over skipped turns. Mothers question the accuracy of the banker's quick math. And a heated debate erupts over whether double sixes should get you out of jail or straight to therapy. Even the cat, previously napping peacefully, is now wide-eyed under the sofa, wondering if it should move out. Your senses become acutely attuned to the soundtrack of battle. The shuffling of cards becomes a warning signal. Every time a community chest or chance card is drawn, the entire room leans forward in silent suspense, the jazz fading to a hum as you await the verdict. Bank error in your favor, collect $100. Cheers. Go to jail. Groans. And always, A new wave of accusation. You're cheating. No, you're cheating. That's not even the right piece. You're supposed to be the boot, not the dog. The arguments reach a fever pitch, punctuated by the sound of jazz musicians apparently having an existential crisis. Grandpa, meanwhile, has entered a trance state, whispering calculations under his breath. He's moved beyond math and into prophecy. If I mortgage Vermont Avenue and trade 2 houses for Reading Railroad, I can survive one more round, unless someone lands on Street Charles Place. What are the odds? He's not talking to anyone in particular, but everyone listens. The man survived 2 world wars and 3 recessions, but nothing shakes him like losing Park Place to his own granddaughter. And then, every so often, silence descends. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, simmering hush before the next big play. The Victrola's needle hits a scratch, looping the same 4 notes while the family holds its collective breath. Someone reaches for the dice. The room watches, wide-eyed, as the outcome is determined not by skill, but by fate, luck, and the mercy of a pair of cubes. Somewhere around the 3rd hour, the music turns a little wild, and so do the players. Jazz and Monopoly feed off each other. The syncopated rhythms of Duke Ellington Egg on a dramatic property auction. A saxophone solo matches your uncle's desperate plea for someone, anyone, to make a deal for Mediterranean Avenue. The noise swells and crashes in waves, the tempo rising every time someone is sent to jail, the mood sinking with every bankrupted cousin. At the end of the night, everyone is a little hoarse, a little frazzled, and more than a little suspicious of the family's future together. The Victrola spins its last tune, the dice roll one final time, and Grandpa's whisper finally stops, replaced by the heavy quiet of exhaustion and regret. Congratulations, you've survived another round of Monopoly's jazz-fueled mayhem. Your ears will ring, your heart will race, and for at least the next week, every roll of the dice will echo like thunder in your dreams. Sweet dreams, if you can get them. There's always one relative who plays like their life depends on it. Aunt Ruth is mortgaging her properties and her reputation. Uncle Frank is making backroom deals in the pantry. Someone just tried to pawn the family cat. It's getting real. Every family has one, the high roller, the cousin who slips on the top hat and transforms into a Wall Street shark before your eyes. The mum who channels the spirit of a 19th century robber baron as soon as she starts building houses on Atlantic Avenue. For them, Monopoly isn't a game. It's a chance to settle scores, make history, and maybe, just maybe, finally prove they were right about buying low and selling high. The board becomes their battlefield, and your childhood memories become collateral damage. Aunt Ruth is first to strike. She's got mortgaged properties stretching from Baltic to Pacific, and not a dime to her name. But does that stop her? Not a chance. With every roll, she conjures creative new ways to avoid paying rent. You wouldn't charge your favorite aunt, would you? She says, batting her eyelashes over a mountain of pink 20s. 5 minutes later, she's accidentally shuffling her mortgage slips into the community chest. She's lost 4 games in a row, but swears this is all part of the strategy. No one believes her, but everyone's too scared to call her bluff. Meanwhile, Uncle Frank, quiet, unassuming, always the first to pass the mashed potatoes, is revealed to be the game's ultimate puppet master. You catch him lurking near the pantry, deep in negotiations with your cousin. Promises of future immunity, alliances sealed with secret handshakes, and, if rumors are to be believed, an IOU signed in ketchup on a napkin. At the table, he's the picture of calm. Away from it, he's orchestrating a full-blown corporate takeover of the orange properties, with Aunt Ruth as his unwitting pawn. Then there's your sibling, the self-styled kingpin. They're flush with cash. Mysteriously, no one can recall how they got it, and they dole out loans at interest rates that would make a 1920s banker blush. If you miss a payment, you're out. If you protest, they remind you that the board never lies. They hold grudges for years. Once, you traded Marvin Gardens for a cookie. You haven't known peace since. It's not just the adults. The younger players catch on fast. Your little sister, once content to be the dog or the iron, now demands to be the race car. She forms alliances with a single glance and dissolves them with a shrug. She'll sweet-talk you out of your last green bill, then bankrupt you for landing on her single, lonely utility. Her ruthlessness is legendary, her victory dances even more so. Inevitably, the tension rises. Deals are struck and broken, sides are chosen and betrayed. Someone tries to pay their rent in Monopoly money from a completely different edition of the game. A scandal that ends in a full family audit. Your brother disappears into the hallway for a suspiciously long time and comes back claiming he found another 50 in the sofa. Uncle Frank's secret stash is discovered inside a hollowed-out potato. The cat, who was never officially a player, ends up with 3 properties and a hotel after crawling across the board in a fit of pique. The game's moral code dissolves entirely by the second hour. Grandpa, usually a pillar of honesty, is caught hiding get-out-of-jail free cards in his vest pocket. Your mother, the game's self-declared banker, refuses to make change for anything under 100. Aunt Ruth, out of options, starts writing promissory notes on actual family photos. If you let me keep Marvin Gardens, you can have this picture of me at Niagara Falls. By the time the dust settles, no one remembers who actually won. Someone is crying, someone is gloating, and Aunt Ruth is already planning her comeback. You're left with an overturned board, a cat wearing a hotel, and the unshakable feeling that this harmless game just changed your family forever. And yes, you'll all play again next week. Because deep down, everyone believes they're just one sneaky deal away from victory, or at least from finally getting the cat off boardwalk. As the 1920s tiptoe toward disaster, the Monopoly board becomes a tiny model of the coming doom. Bankruptcies, bailouts, and shady loans fly across the table. You're learning more about American finance than any school could teach, and it's not making you optimistic. At first, it all seems harmless. A bit of buying here, a little rent collection there, everyone basking in the illusion that prosperity is just one more roll away. But just like the real world outside, your living room economy starts to unravel fast. It begins when Aunt Ruth, flush with cash and confidence, overextends herself buying up every orange property she lands on. Her empire looks unstoppable until the first unlucky roll lands her on boardwalk. Now the sight of 3 gleaming red hotels and a menacing glare from your cousin. Suddenly, the family's first bankruptcy is upon you. There's a special chill that sweeps through the room when someone goes bankrupt in Monopoly. It starts with awkward silence, then the grim recitation of assets. 2 railroads, a mortgaged utility, and a single battered house on Baltic Avenue. The table watches as Aunt Ruth slowly slides her remaining properties to the creditor. Shame written all over her face. She tries to bargain for one last turn, but the rules, and your cousin, are merciless. Sorry, Aunt Ruth. That's capitalism. She's out, but she won't go quietly. She'll lurk behind the sofa, coaching other players, and plotting her next comeback. With 1 player down, the survivors scramble. Debts are called in, secret loans get repaid, or not, and the game's unofficial central bank, your mother, begins offering creative financing. If you can pay me half now, and the rest after you pass go, I'll forgive that time you borrowed my car and didn't return it. The line between game and real life blurs. Your little brother offers to trade a week of chores for Marvin Gardens, while Grandpa attempts to consolidate his failing railroad empire by merging with the nearest player, muttering something about too big to fail. Suddenly, every transaction is suspect. House rules are rewritten on the fly, often favoring whoever's currently holding the bank. The bailout is invented, a mysterious process where the poorest player somehow receives a stack of 50s, usually accompanied by much winking and reminders that we're all family here. At least, until someone lands on Park Place with a hotel. Then it's every person for themselves. It isn't long before panic sets in. 3 people are mortgaged to the hilt. The pile of play money grows thin. A desperate hush falls over the room as your sister rolls the dice, hoping against hope that she'll skirt past the rent-heavy gauntlet of the last few properties. No such luck. She lands squarely on North Carolina Avenue, now fully developed, and faces bankruptcy with stoic dignity, or at least without flipping the board, which everyone silently appreciates. As the casualties mount, the survivors grow more ruthless. Backroom deals are whispered in corners, alliances are made and broken, and at least one cousin is caught slipping a 10 under the table. Your mother is forced to accept creative collateral in the form of 3 marbles and a half-eaten cookie. Meanwhile, the family cat, sensing opportunity, claims an abandoned railroad as its own and sits smugly on the deed. You begin to notice the odd life lessons creeping in. Turns out, rent control is a myth. Your relatives are far more cutthroat than you ever guessed, and the bank always comes out on top. You learn how easy it is for a financial empire to crumble overnight, how fast fortunes are lost, and how often the most desperate player turns into the craftiest negotiator. Maybe you start questioning whether the real Great Depression started with a bad investment or just an unlucky roll. Finally, as the game winds down, you're left with a single winner, surrounded by the hollow eyes of their defeated kin, clutching a rainbow stack of play money and already bragging about their keen business sense. The rest of you quietly gather up your dignity and whatever loose change remains, haunted by the miniature economic crash you just survived. Congratulations. You've just lived through a simulation of the Great Depression. No soup kitchens, but plenty of emotional bankruptcy. Don't worry, you'll be back at the board next week. After all, hope springs eternal, and so does family denial. Winning isn't enough. You have to rub it in. The victorious cousin struts around the living room, wearing the top hat piece and shouting, "It's just business," like a pint-sized Rockefeller. The rest of you plot revenge. It starts innocently enough. A little victory dance, a smirk, a gleam in their eye. Maybe a gentle reminder about that time you mortgaged all your properties just to stay in the game. But quickly, the atmosphere changes. The sore winner emerges, not satisfied with simple triumph, but intent on ensuring everyone in the family remembers exactly who bankrupted them, how it happened, and how superior their monopoly skills truly are. Suddenly, the Monopoly board is less a game and more a one-act play. Your cousin's new persona is a strange hybrid of Andrew Carnegie and a second-grade bully. The phrase, "It's just business," is now delivered with the delicate nuance of a traffic cop at rush hour, echoing through the house long after the board is put away. They drape themselves in play money like a king in exile, occasionally tossing a few bills into the air just to remind you of their bottomless fake wealth. No humiliation is too small. They recount every bad trade you made. You really thought giving me Street James Place for 2 railroads was a good deal? Every ill-timed rent payment. Every single roll that went wrong. The most painful part is that you can't argue with them. The evidence is literally stacked in front of them in neon pink and yellow bills. As they parade around, collecting high fives from bystanders who didn't even play, you start to recognize an ancient, primal urge within yourself. The burning need for vengeance. Or, at the very least, for them to step on a rogue hotel piece in the dark. But a true sore winner isn't content with just one performance. They launch a full-blown campaign, verbal, physical, and psychological. Your cousin starts scheduling rematches before the board is even put away, insisting that everyone deserves a second chance to lose. They assign nicknames based on your performance: bankrupt Bob, mortgaged Martha, and you catch them doodling cartoons of your last desperate trade on the back of a property deed. Any family gathering now comes with a side order of gloating. Thanksgiving? Remember when I owned everything except waterworks? Christmas? I'd buy you a present, but I already bankrupted you last month. Even the family dog can't escape, forced to wear the iron token as a badge of shame. You try to let it slide, but your blood boils every time they use Monopoly terms in unrelated conversation. Pass go becomes code for move over on the couch, and go to jail is their new way to tell you to stop talking. This is the modern version of the victory parade. And it comes with confetti, monologues, and the subtle threat of eternal bragging rights. The rest of the family adapts by forming a silent, simmering alliance. You exchange meaningful glances over mashed potatoes, quietly plotting your comeback. Aunt Ruth starts reading up on Monopoly strategy. Mom sharpens her skills as banker. And your brother crafts elaborate revenge scenarios involving elaborate trades and, if things get desperate, the introduction of new house rules. But for now, the sore winner rules the roost. The Monopoly box is left in a place of honor, right next to the family photo albums, as if it were a treasured heirloom. Your cousin polishes the thimble piece and sets it on the mantel like a trophy. They issue speeches from the armchair and invent family holidays to celebrate the great bankrupting of 27. You can't help but marvel at the sheer scale of their hubris. If only that energy could be channeled into something useful like diplomacy or repairing the leaky roof. But alas, the sore winner's reign must run its course. Until then, you bide your time, nurse your grudges, and make secret plans for next week's game, the ultimate rematch. After all, Monopoly teaches us that victory is temporary, revenge is sweet, and the only thing more satisfying than winning is making sure the winner finally lands on your fully developed boardwalk. Sweet dreams. Future tycoon. Sleep well. Revenge is best served on a pastel board, with interest. With temptation everywhere, morality goes out the window. Extra hundreds mysteriously appear. The bank is audited, fingers are pointed. The family dog is briefly suspected of money laundering. The Monopoly board is supposed to be a level playing field, where hard work and cunning pay off, and luck is the only wild card. But as any seasoned player will tell you, Monopoly doesn't just test your financial skills, it tests your ethics. And, as it turns out, the lure of a secret stash of rainbow money is sometimes stronger than the bonds of family. It always begins small, a mistaken 20 slipped beneath the board, a property card quietly left off the table until it's needed for leverage. But the slope is slippery and steep. And once you realize how easy it is to slip an extra 50 into your stack, the game's moral compass starts spinning like a roulette wheel. After all, what is Monopoly but a simulation of American capitalism at its most lawless? Suddenly, everyone is a potential crook. Did you just take an extra $100 for passing go? No, I just got lucky. Sure you did, Aunt Ruth. Sure you did. The real drama comes when someone decides to audit the bank. The banker, usually chosen for their trustworthiness or their ability to do math while distracted by screaming, faces a full inquisition. Every bill is counted, every deed card is scrutinized, grand accusations fly. That's not your orange set, you mortgaged that hours ago. How did you get so many 500s, Dad? You haven't landed on go since Tuesday. No one is safe from suspicion. Not even Grandma, who accidentally sits on a $100 bill and claims she thought it was a heating pad. The tension ratchets up. House rules become the stuff of legend. If you're caught cheating, you have to sit out a round. But, of course, no one actually enforces it. Everyone knows that, deep down, cheating is as much a part of the tradition as the thimble or the little greenhouses. Even the family dog isn't above suspicion. He's been lurking under the table for hours, and now the iron piece has gone missing. Again, you'd swear you saw him pawing at a 20, but the evidence is circumstantial at best. As the hours pass, new cheating methods evolve. Cards are palmed like a Vegas magician's best trick. Loose bills vanish and reappear, usually in the hand of the player with the shiftiest eyes. Cousins create emergency banks in their socks. Your sister forgets to charge rent 3 times in a row, until someone lands on her hotel-laden yellow set. And suddenly her memory returns with suspicious clarity. Accusations fly. Every move is questioned. Where did you get that hotel? You didn't have enough money to build it. Did you just swap cards with Uncle Frank under the table? The Monopoly board turns into a courtroom. Every player a defense attorney, every banker a suspect. The phrase, "let's just trust each other," is met with laughter so bitter it could curdle milk. You begin to realize Monopoly is less a game about real estate and more a masterclass in trust issues. The longer you play, the more elaborate the deceptions become. Bribes are openly offered. "I'll let you slide on rent if you don't tell Mom I took that extra $50. Side deals are negotiated in the hallway, with witnesses posted at the door to make sure no one else overhears. If you leave for a bathroom break, you come back to find your empire mysteriously diminished, and your favorite property mortgaged for your own good. Inevitably, the truth comes out. Someone gets too greedy, hiding hundreds in their sleeve only to sneeze them out mid-rent negotiation. There's a collective gasp, a chorus of accusations, and then, after the dust settles, a new rule: all sleeves must be rolled up, and the dog is barred from banking. For now, but deep down, you know this is what makes Monopoly great. Cheating is a tradition, a rite of passage, and maybe the purest reflection of the game's true spirit: ruthless, opportunistic, and, if you're lucky, just innocent enough to get away with it. Next week, the cycle starts anew, the audits get sharper, and the dog gets frisked twice before play begins. After all, what's a family game night without a little white-collar crime? Sweet dreams? And don't forget to count your bills before you sleep. It's past midnight, but no one will quit. Bleary-eyed and desperate, you play on, powered by cold coffee and the hope that you'll finally bankrupt your cousin. Someone started hallucinating that the thimble is speaking to them. The midnight game is a special tier of Monopoly madness, one that pushes the boundaries of physical endurance, emotional stability, and whatever remains of your family's love for one another. You knew things were getting serious when Grandma brought out the emergency oil lamp because the electric bill money went to pay rent on Ventnor Avenue. Now, the shadows dance across the living room walls like silent spectators, bearing witness to the unraveling of your collective sanity. Your body is begging for sleep, but the board refuses to release you. Every time you try to stand up, someone rolls doubles and shouts, "No! It's your turn, sit down." You obey, not because you want to, but because the thought of leaving mid-game feels like a crime punishable by exile. The air is a thick soup of exhaustion, jazz static, and the faint scent of burnt coffee grounds. Your cousin, who should have been eliminated 2 hours ago, somehow hangs on with a mortgaged railroad and 2 ones. Their survival defies logic, math, and several known laws of physics. They roll the dice with the haunted optimism of someone who refuses to accept reality. You've watched them avoid bankruptcy so many times you're convinced they've made a deal with forces beyond the mortal plane. Meanwhile, the hallucinations begin. Your little brother claims the thimble whispered investment advice. Buy the Reds. Aunt Ruth swears the dog token winked at her. Grandpa, whose coffee cup has been empty for 45 minutes, insists he can smell the Great Depression coming off Marvin Gardens. You try to ignore them and focus on your dwindling stack of bills, which now looks like the world's saddest sandwich. Fatigue warps everything. You can no longer distinguish between the dice and the salt shaker. Chance cards look like ancient scriptures. The go-to-jail card feels like a personal attack. You start to question your choices, not just in the game, but in life. How did you get here? Why did you trade Boardwalk for a single yellow property? What is money? What is time? Why does Mom keep rolling sevens? Has she always rolled sevens? The midnight game is where tempers peak. Every decision sparks conflict. A simple property trade becomes a full-scale negotiation, complete with emotional blackmail. If you don't give me Ventnor, I'm telling everyone who broke the gravy boat in 24. Accusations become colorful, deals become desperate. The dog is now being actively bribed for good luck. At this point, no one eats. You survive only on stale crackers and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, your next roll will change everything. You clutch the dice like talismans, praying to the gods of chance, while your exhausted brain begins composing dramatic monologues about poverty and betrayal. Your uncle is slumped back in the armchair, muttering, "Just one hotel. I only needed one." When someone finally goes bankrupt, it doesn't feel triumphant, it feels tragic. They gather their things, push the mortgage slips into a sad little pile, and wander off into the kitchen like a ghost seeking closure. You salute them silently. They have escaped the board's clutches. They are free. But you are not so lucky. The game drags on, fueled by deteriorating logic and raw spite. The room feels timeless, like you've slipped into a parallel dimension where it is always 2:47 a.m., and you are always one bad roll from total ruin. You try to remember what sunlight looks like. You wonder if you'll ever sleep again, or if your life is now exclusively conducted under the flickering glow of the living room lamp, trading greenhouses, and pretending you understand mortgages. Finally, when the last player is ruined and the final taunt is thrown, the board grows silent. You sit there, dazed, unsure who won or why you ever cared. The sun is rising. Birds are chirping outside, blissfully unaware of the emotional devastation inside your home. You stumble off to bed, exhausted, triumphant, and slightly traumatized. But deep down, a tiny spark remains, because next week, someone will say, "Should we play again?" And you will, because sleep is for the weak, and Monopoly is forever. The next morning is a scene of devastation. Monopoly money in the radiator, property cards in the gravy boat, and a frosty silence that says, "Last night's wounds will not heal quickly." You vow never to play again, until next week. Sunlight creeps into the dining room, illuminating the wreckage of last night's fun. The board is askew, pieces scattered like ancient ruins after a particularly messy war. The thimble lies on its side, looking as if it's finally had enough. Someone's hotel has migrated to the butter dish, and there's a get-out-of-jail-free card floating in your cereal. The only thing missing is a chalk outline and a few spent shell casings. No one makes eye contact. Dad mutters into his coffee, pretending to read the newspaper, but mostly hiding from the collective disappointment radiating from the table. Mom is scraping play money out of the toaster with the quiet determination of someone who has seen too much. Your brother tiptoes past the living room, making himself scarce in case someone remembers that he accidentally knocked over the board when he landed on Boardwalk with 3 hotels. Grandpa sits in his chair, silently reviewing his life choices, muttering about the good old days when games ended with a handshake instead of a week-long grudge. Aunt Ruth is nowhere to be found. Rumor has it she's out back, plotting her revenge or possibly writing a tell, all memoir titled How I Was Robbed on Marvin Gardens. The dog, ever loyal, chews quietly on what may have once been Vermont Avenue. Breakfast is quiet. Every scrape of a spoon sounds like a challenge. Every cough feels pointed. You nibble on toast, staring at the gravy boat, wondering if you'll ever see your beloved red deeds again. The emotional hangover is real, more potent than any Prohibition-era gin, and much harder to sleep off. Conversation turns to the weather, the price of bread, or whether the cat will ever return after being used as collateral for a short-lived alliance. You try to piece together what happened. The memory is hazy. The auction for Street, Charles Place, the fierce debate over house rules, the moment when Uncle Frank declared bankruptcy and still tried to collect rent. You remember someone shouting, "It's just a game," right before a pile of Monopoly money was thrown like confetti in a fit of righteous rage. Last night's champion, your cousin, the self-styled Rockefeller, enters the room with the swagger of a world leader, but one glare from the rest of the family sends them scurrying for cover. At school, the trauma lingers. You flinch every time you see a board game. You eye your classmates with suspicion, wondering if they too have a secret hoard of 500s. At work, your dad avoids anyone who looks remotely like a thimble. Grandma spends the afternoon quietly sewing, but you know she's planning her comeback. You find yourself humming jazz under your breath and feeling oddly nervous whenever anyone rolls dice in your presence. But the silence is never permanent. By midweek, the stories begin to surface. Remember when Dad tried to mortgage Baltic Avenue for a slice of pie? Someone asks. Laughter bubbles up, tentative at first, then contagious. The dog, once again, retrieves a missing property card from under the sofa, tail wagging as if to say, "It's all a game after all." Forgiveness comes slowly, maybe over a shared joke, or the rediscovery of a missing token. You promise each other, never again. But as the week fades, the wounds soften, the pain dulls, and the board finds its way back to its shelf, ready for next time. Because the unspoken truth of family game night is this: no matter how many alliances are shattered or fortunes lost, you always, always come back for more. Next week, the table will be cleared, the tokens sorted, and new grudges ready to bloom. Because families don't talk about game night, but they never really stop playing. The phrase, "you're in timeout," is born. Children, adults, and even the family cat are subjected to cooling off periods on the porch. No one can remember why you started fighting, but everyone agrees it was your brother's fault. The family timeout is an invention born of necessity, not mercy. In the early days of Monopoly madness, every spat ended with an apology and a sigh. But as the games dragged into the night, patience wore thin, tempers frayed, and apologies began to sound like legal disclaimers. One minute, you're arguing over who stole the last $5 bill. The next, someone is exiled to the back porch, clutching a thimble and plotting their return. It starts small. The youngest cousin gets sent to the hall for trying to hide a hotel piece in their sock. "You need to cool off," says Mom, in the tone of someone who desperately wishes she could join the cat on the windowsill. But it quickly escalates. Uncle Frank, caught making clandestine deals in the pantry, is banished outside with a mug of cold coffee. "You'll come back in when you remember how to play fair," Grandma decrees, her voice unyielding as a chance card. Soon, the timeout bench becomes the most coveted seat in the house, if only because it's the only place with a guarantee of peace. Your sister, in an act of self-preservation, volunteers for a timeout after losing her railroad empire. The cat, victim of too many hotel building mishaps and one misguided attempt to collect rent on Park Place, slinks out to the porch without protest, curling up in a ball of silent dignity. The back porch is soon filled with a rotating cast of exiles, sore losers, suspected cheaters, and those who simply need a break from the relentless negotiations over waterworks. Nobody ever remembers how the arguments start, but they always know how they end, with a timeout and a dramatic sigh. The timeout becomes the family's pressure valve, the only way to keep game night from turning into a full-blown historical reenactment of the Hatfields and McCoys. By the second hour, even Grandma puts herself in timeout, mumbling something about the folly of unchecked capitalism and the rising price of eggs. The rules of timeout are unclear, subject to instant amendment and selective enforcement. Sometimes it lasts 5 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes until someone bribes their way back in with a plate of cookies. Mom keeps a running list of offenses. Arguing with the banker, 2 minutes. Making up your own rules, 5 minutes. Telling your little sister that community chest means you get to raid her piggy bank, eternity. The dog gets a standing invitation for licking the dice, which everyone agrees is at least a minor misdemeanor. But timeout isn't just for punishment, it's for preservation. When the living room grows too heated, you find yourself sneaking out to the porch just to catch your breath. The cool night air, the distant sound of crickets, and the faint smell of the neighbor's burning leaves soothe your Monopoly-frazzled nerves. You're joined by a parade of relatives, all eager to forget the harsh realities of game night. A shared look, a laugh, and soon the wounds begin to heal. Eventually, someone makes peace offerings, a mug of cocoa, a plate of leftover pie, a heartfelt apology mumbled into a scarf. Slowly, the porch empties. The game resumes with lighter hearts and slightly more honest intentions, at least until someone tries to trade a railroad for a slice of cake, and the cycle begins again. By the end of the night, the concept of timeout has been enshrined in family law, as essential as free parking and almost as controversial. It becomes a family legend, repeated at every reunion, told to every new in-law, and whispered as a warning to newcomers. No matter what, don't make eye contact with Grandma when she's in timeout. Because Monopoly isn't just a board game, it's a crucible for family tradition, a catalyst for new rituals, and, sometimes, the best reason you'll ever have to step outside and breathe. Prohibition doesn't just apply to alcohol. When Monopoly is banned in your house, the kids turn to underground board game rings, contraband chutes and ladders, secret parcheesi tournaments. The addiction adapts. It always starts with a crackdown. After too many midnight Monopoly meltdowns, and one especially memorable incident involving a thrown thimble and an overturned gravy boat, the parental authorities decide enough is enough. The board is confiscated, property cards locked in the high cupboard, and a new household law is announced. Monopoly is banned until further notice. The board is stashed beside the fruitcake nobody eats, and the dog is frisked for hidden dice. For a day or two, the house is eerily quiet. No one dares utter the word rent. The youngest cousin stares longingly at the empty shelf where the Monopoly box once perched. And Grandma sighs wistfully, remembering her empire of mortgaged railroads. You try to fill the void with chores, fresh air, and polite conversation, but soon the itch returns. The hunger for competition, for dice, for the sweet taste of victory, it cannot be denied. Soon the underground market emerges. It begins in whispers. Meet me behind the garage after dinner. Bring marbles. You trade comic books for a battered pack of playing cards. Dice are crafted from sugar cubes and marked with a toothpick. Chutes and ladders becomes a hot commodity, distributed in manila envelopes under the table at breakfast. Your older brother hosts clandestine rounds of in the attic, with a password system more complicated than any speakeasy in Chicago. Every household has a dealer. In yours, it's your sister, who acquires a battered parcheesi set through mysterious means. Don't ask questions, just roll. The living room becomes a front. Underneath the innocent chatter, coded language flows. Let's have some dessert means meet in the basement in 5. Someone draws up a bracket for championship jacks. And the dog is recruited as a lookout, rewarded with the odd piece of bologna for alerting the crew to approaching adults. The black market brings innovation. With Monopoly off the table, games are adapted to scratch the same itch. Parcheesi becomes property acquisition and hostile takeover. Old Maid gets a cutthroat twist, now called Last Banker Standing. Even Go Fish devolves into a no-holds-barred trading floor, complete with IOUs and side bets. If it can be counted, rolled, or bet upon, it's smuggled, played, and occasionally gambled on with leftover Halloween candy. But, as with all great underworlds, power attracts attention. Soon the adults catch wind. They notice missing sugar cubes and odd gatherings in the linen closet, suspicious noises in the night, the unmistakable rattle of dice, the shushing of co-conspirators, a hissed warning, "Hide the game, it's Mom." The dog, once the innocent house pet, is now under surveillance for smuggling dice in his collar. Grandpa, nostalgic for his golden days on Boardwalk, looks the other way, so long as no one's playing mousetrap in his recliner. Eventually, there's a raid. The attic is stormed, playing cards confiscated, marbles spilled across the floor in a slow-motion disaster. A half-completed game of chutes and ladders is discovered under the sofa, the evidence as damning as empty gin bottles during the real Prohibition. The ring is broken up, for now, but you can't ban the spirit of competition. Not for long. Within days, new games pop up. Jigsaw puzzles become betting arenas. The family cat is declared the referee for tiddlywinks. Someone tries to teach everyone chess, which lasts exactly 4 minutes before someone invents extreme chess, involving 2 boards and 1 wild ferret. The ferret is swiftly banned. The Monopoly board stays hidden, but its influence lingers, like a ghost in the walls. You become experts in the art of covert gaming, quick to hide evidence, faster to deny involvement, and always ready for the next challenge. The adults think they've won, but you know better, because in the end, no matter how many games get banned, the need for family competition will always find a way. Prohibition, as history proves, only breeds more creativity and just a little more chaos. Eventually, your family seeks outside help. The 1920s don't have therapists, so you turn to the next best thing. A stern neighbor with a mustache who tells you to walk it off. It's not helpful, but at least it's free. It's a sign of true Monopoly trauma when your household, bruised from the emotional shrapnel of last night's fun, looks around the breakfast table and realizes that maybe, just maybe, you need intervention. Not the quiet, couch-bound sort with soft lighting and a gentle listener. No, the 1920s don't believe in such modern luxuries. Instead, you get Mr. Witherspoon from next door, World War I veteran mustache enthusiast and proud owner of the meanest rosebush on the block. Mr. Witherspoon has opinions, most of which he shares before he's even been offered a cup of coffee. You kids are too soft. In my day, we settled things with a coin toss and a handshake. Or, if that didn't work, a game of stickball until someone got a black eye. He inspects the Monopoly board like it's a foreign object. This is what's causing all the trouble? Colored money and fake hotels? He squints at the thimble as if it personally insulted him. His prescription for family drama is simple. Go outside, get some fresh air, walk it off. You try to explain that you're not suffering from leg cramps, but from the deep psychological wounds left by Aunt Ruth's third hostile takeover and the fact that your brother is still hiding the race car token in his sock. Mr. Witherspoon isn't moved. Back in the war, we didn't have time for feelings. We had mud, and if you were lucky, you got to keep your boots. The family, desperate for any solution, follows his advice. Shoes are tied, doors are flung open, and a mass migration into the yard commences. It's supposed to be restorative. Instead, everyone wanders around in circles, replaying bitter trades in their heads. You find yourself glaring at the flower beds, imagining tiny hotels sprouting among the petunias. Grandpa mutters about property values and tries to mortgage the compost bin. Therapy, it turns out, isn't so much about healing as it is about distracting yourself until the urge to strangle a sibling passes. Dad attempts some deep breathing exercises, which devolve into a competition about who can hold their breath the longest. Your sister, always the innovator, suggests a group discussion of feelings, an idea met with such horror that even the dog leaves the yard. After a while, Mr. Witherspoon, satisfied with his day's work, offers a final pearl of wisdom. Remember, it's just a game. Next time, try not to play with quitters. He ambles home, leaving the family more confused and slightly more determined than before. Without a professional therapist, you improvise your own methods. Grandma prescribes cookies, which everyone agrees are at least as effective as talk therapy. Aunt Ruth leads a round of calisthenics, which descends into chaos after Grandpa pulls a hamstring trying to jump over the garden hose. But the real therapy comes in unexpected ways. Mom finds solace in reorganizing the game shelf, alphabetizing every box and hiding Monopoly at the very back, just in case. The cousins draft a peace treaty, swearing off property-based games for the rest of the week, a promise destined to last 3 days. Tops. You bond over shared grievances and the lingering scent of Mr. Witherspoon's aftershave wafting through the open window. As evening approaches, the family drifts back inside, a little lighter, a little more willing to forgive, or at least forget. The Monopoly wounds have scabbed over. Laughter returns. Someone dares to suggest a round of cards. Grandpa sighs, checks his pockets for missing tokens, and nods. Because sometimes, all you need is a walk, a mustachioed neighbor, and the promise that next time, you'll play something less competitive. Spoiler, you won't. Therapist not included. But somehow, you're ready for the next round. The addiction spreads down the block. Soon, everyone's fighting over imaginary rent and arguing about utilities. The entire neighborhood is one bad roll away from a municipal meltdown. It starts with innocent curiosity. Mrs. Jenkins, from 2 doors down, peers through her lace curtains, watching your family gather for another tense night of fun. One day, she stops you on the sidewalk, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Is it true your Uncle Frank mortgaged the front porch for a railroad? News travels fast on these streets. Before you know it, Monopoly fever is sweeping through the neighborhood like a head cold in January. By the next Saturday, game boards appear in every window. You hear the click of dice echoing from the Parker's porch, the unmistakable hiss of heated debate rising from the Martins' parlor. Kids form alliances that last until someone lands on boardwalk, and then dissolve into open hostilities. The neighborhood takes on the nervous energy of a town teetering on the edge of a gold rush, if gold rushes were measured in colored paper and small metal tokens. Soon, house rules are traded across hedges like top-secret recipes. The Parkers allow double free parking, one for money, one for snacks. The Martins have a tradition where anyone caught cheating must mow Mrs. Jenkins' lawn. The Fletchers, a wild bunch, invent an all-day Monopoly marathon with scheduled breaks for lemonade, tears, and mediation. There's talk of a community tournament, complete with a handmade championship top hat crafted from cardboard, glue, and raw ambition. The grown-ups get involved too. And suddenly, everything escalates. Mr. Ramirez, normally mild-mannered, starts running odds in his notebook, taking side bets on who will go bankrupt first. The neighborhood PTA, originally formed to plan bake sales, rebrands as the Monopoly Rules Committee. Meetings get heated. Mrs. Jenkins, wielding a 3-ring binder, filibusters for 15 minutes about the proper way to handle auctioned properties. The next week, the committee votes to ban her from officiating games until she chills out. As for the children, they form a ragtag band of Monopoly entrepreneurs. Tommy from across the street rents out his collection of lucky dice for a nickel a night. Lucy, with a keen sense for opportunity, starts a side hustle selling get-out-of-jail-free cards she's hand-drawn herself. They aren't tournament legal, but no one cares. This is Monopoly, not the Supreme Court. Soon, the neighborhood is awash in counterfeit property cards, unauthorized tokens, and more whispered side deals than a city council budget meeting. The pressure builds as everyone's competitive streak emerges. What used to be a peaceful block of well-mown lawns and polite nods turns into a hotbed of rivalry and drama. You witness old friends refuse to speak for a week after a particularly nasty rent dispute. Neighborhood dogs, once allies in the quest for dropped sandwich crusts, now bark at anyone holding a hotel piece. Even the mailman walks a little faster, wary of being roped into an impromptu tiebreaker, or worse, used as an impartial banker. On Sundays, the aftermath is visible. Stray Monopoly bills on the sidewalk, a stray thimble discovered in someone's rose bush, a child solemnly dragging a broken dog token to its final resting place under the hydrangeas. Mrs. Jenkins' lawn, mowed 3 times in a single day thanks to the cheating clause, looks better than ever, though her patience is running thin. As weeks pass, the drama cycles. Old feuds fade, new alliances form, and the neighborhood returns to a fragile peace. But every so often, a challenge is issued, a board is dusted off, and the great Monopoly experiment resumes, louder, messier, and somehow even more addictive than before. Because when Monopoly comes to town, no one is safe. Not from the competition, not from the arguments, and definitely not from the hilarious, ever-evolving chaos of a block obsessed. In this neighborhood, it's always one roll away from municipal meltdown, and no one would have it any other way. Parents crack down. Monopoly sets are hidden in attics, property cards burned in the fireplace. Still, the lure of the board is too strong. Someone always finds a way. It starts with a look, a tired, haunted look shared between grown-ups as the 30th Monopoly argument of the month echoes through the house. "Enough is enough," Dad says, his voice trembling somewhere between exhaustion and hysteria. Mom solemnly collects the dice. As if disarming a bomb, the edict comes down. Effective immediately. Monopoly is outlawed. The board is banished to the attic, the deeds and tokens locked away in the box, which is then taped shut and double-wrapped in a quilt. The thimble is rumored to be buried in the backyard. Children gather in the hallway, shell-shocked, like tiny bootleggers watching the last crate of gin sink into the river. The house is suddenly quiet. At first, there's a sense of relief. No more late-night shouting, no more cat hiding under the sofa during property auctions. Mom reclaims her gravy boat. Dad's blood pressure drops to pre-Monopoly levels. There are murmurs of peace, a cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, life will return to normal. But Monopoly has left its mark. It calls from the shadows, from the far reaches of the attic, where dust bunnies and forgotten Christmas decorations gather. You find yourself reaching for play money when paying the milkman. Grandpa absent-mindedly mutters mortgage rates in his sleep. Grandma sighs at the sight of her now empty windowsill, once crowded with tiny green houses and hotels. Something is missing. The ban doesn't last. Kids are natural-born schemers, and Monopoly addiction is stronger than parental authority. The first attempts at rebellion are clumsy. A homemade board drawn on the back of a grocery bag. Buttons for tokens, coins for rent. Cousins hold clandestine practice rounds using a checkerboard and a deck of regular playing cards. "Red squares are hotels," whispers your sister. "And don't tell Mom about the secret rent jar in the kitchen." A black market blossoms overnight. Neighborhood kids meet behind the garage, swapping game pieces for marbles and candy. "I'll give you 2 gumdrops for a fake boardwalk card," says Tommy from next door, waving a blue slip of construction paper. Soon the underground ring expands. Someone finds an old, battered, "Sorry" set, which is quickly repurposed for property disputes. Jacks and marbles become makeshift currency. The dog, sensing opportunity, resumes his role as the family lookout, barking whenever parents approach. The adults, desperate to keep the peace, escalate enforcement. Surprise attic inspections, random box searches, threats to burn all the dice. One evening, Dad stands by the fireplace, holding up the last original chance card like Hamlet contemplating a skull. "No more," he proclaims, tossing it into the flames. The smell of burnt cardboard lingers, mingling with a sense of collective loss. But you can't legislate away Monopoly. Not truly. The family is hooked. You invent new games to fill the void. A cutthroat version of Go Fish, high-stakes tiddlywinks, and marathon rounds of Old Maid where the loser has to do dishes for a week. None compare to the sweet thrill of property acquisition, the quiet power of holding boardwalk, the drama of a perfectly timed go-to-jail card. The Monopoly box waits, patient, in the attic. Every so often, during spring cleaning or a thunderstorm, someone will sneak up to visit it, tracing their fingers over the faded lid, remembering past glories and grudges. One stormy night, a cousin sneaks the board down, and the forbidden game resumes under cover of darkness. The laughter, the accusations, the wild, unruly joy all return. Monopoly is reborn, more powerful and more secretive than ever, because you can ban a board game, but you can't ban the competitive spirit, or the hope that next time you'll finally land on boardwalk and win it all. The cycle continues, proving once and for all that in the great battle of parent versus play, Monopoly will always find a way back to the table. In an effort to curb addiction, families invent new hobbies: stamp collecting, sock darning, and the world's slowest game of charades. It's all less dangerous than Monopoly, but far more boring. After the great Monopoly ban sweeps the neighborhood, families are left with a peculiar void, a hunger for something, anything, to fill the time and soothe the itch for drama. At first, optimism reigns. "We'll rediscover wholesome fun," Mom proclaims, brandishing a stack of jigsaw puzzles. Grandpa proposes a stamp collection revival, reminiscing about his prized upside-down airplane stamp. A legend that, upon closer inspection, turns out to be a normal stamp he accidentally glued to the page upside down. Soon, the living room is transformed into a battleground of forced cheerfulness. Someone sets up a knitting circle. "We'll all learn a new skill," Aunt Ruth announces, her needles clicking ominously. You attempt to darn socks, a process so tedious you begin to suspect it was invented purely as a form of punishment for hyperactive children. The family dog escapes to the porch in protest, while your little brother manages to sew his own mitten to the armrest. Stamp collecting proves only marginally more exciting. Everyone gathers around the album, squinting at slightly different shades of green, and debating whether that mark is a rare printing error or just a mustard stain. Cousins fight over who gets to use the magnifying glass, leading to a 10-minute standoff that ends only when Mom confiscates it and declares, "No one gets the glass until you can behave." The highlight of the evening? Finding a Canadian stamp. The excitement lasts all of 3 seconds. Charades is next. "This will be fun," Dad insists. It's not. You spend the first round trying to mime the grapes of wrath, which devolves into a heated debate about whether grapes can even feel wrath, and how, exactly, one is supposed to convey that through interpretive dance. By round 3, Grandpa is pretending to be the gold standard, which looks a lot like him taking a nap in the armchair. No one guesses correctly, but everyone agrees he should win on principle. Other hobbies appear and disappear in rapid succession. Someone tries to start a book club, but the first selection, financial planning for children, is met with universal groans. The cousins organize a potato sack race in the backyard, but Aunt Ruth pulls a muscle, and the dog runs off with a sack, turning it into a neighborhood chase scene. Scrapbooking becomes a thing for a week, until your little brother glues himself to the dining table. Dad attempts birdwatching from the living room window, counting exactly 1 pigeon and 3 crows before giving up and rereading the Monopoly rulebook for fun. By week 2, desperation sets in. Grandma dusts off her harmonica and tries to teach everyone a waltz. You invent games out of household chores. Who can sweep the fastest? Guess what's in the junk drawer? Anything to break the monotony. There's a brief, ill-fated attempt to build a ship in a bottle, which ends with the ship stuck upside down and everyone re-examining the upside-down stamp in Grandpa's album for comfort. Still, something is missing. None of these distractions deliver the raw thrill of a Monopoly showdown, the sweet taste of revenge after a shrewd property trade, or the camaraderie forged in the fires of shared bankruptcy. The family grows listless. Even the dog seems bored, having exhausted his supply of hidden bones and now eyeing the jigsaw pieces with suspicion. Eventually, the old ways creep back in. Someone suggests just looking at the Monopoly box for nostalgia. The board is brought out, ostensibly to check for missing pieces, but soon enough the dice are rattling again. Laughter, groans, and wild accusations fill the room. The boredom lifts. For all its dangers, Monopoly gave the family a sense of unity, albeit one built on property deals and vendettas. In the end, the rise of DIY distractions only proves one thing. Nothing brings a family together quite like a little bit of chaos. And sometimes, the world's slowest game of charades is just the warm-up for the world's most dangerous board game. The first unofficial Monopoly Anonymous meetings take place. The only step is admitting you're powerless over Boardwalk. Attendance is high. Progress is slow. It happens in basements, church halls, and, occasionally, the back booth at the local soda fountain. Someone tacks a sign to the door, Monopoly Support Group, all welcome, no dice allowed. A nervous energy hangs in the air. Neighbors trickle in, clutching half-empty coffee cups and avoiding eye contact. No one speaks until someone finally whispers, "I haven't yelled pay rent in 3 days." There's an awkward round of applause. The meeting begins with the ritual confessions. My name is Edna, and I once hid 3 hotels under my petticoat. My name is Frank, and I convinced my daughter to trade Boardwalk for Marvin Gardens and a piece of lemon pie. I still can't look her in the eye. Each story is met with sympathetic nods and a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional dog barking outside. A dog that once ate the iron token. If the rumors are true, the group is diverse. You see grandmas, grandkids, uncles, mothers, and at least one neighbor who's only here because her family holds a Monopoly intervention every Sunday. Someone in the back fidgets with a tiny green house, rolling it between their fingers like a rosary bead. You realize support groups, much like the game itself, attract all types. The chronic cheater, the perennial bankrupt, the undefeated sore winner now suffering from withdrawal. Step 1 is always the same. Admit you are powerless over the board. This is harder than it sounds. A few holdouts refuse, insisting, "I could quit any time. I just like the colored money." One dad in a newsboy cap breaks down as he recounts losing his dignity and 4 properties to a 7-year-old with a killer smile. Everyone can relate. The sharing gets real. You hear tales of families torn apart by a bad trade, children sent to timeout for negotiating back-alley deals, and marriages tested by a single ill-fated landing on Park Place. The collective trauma is both hilarious and oddly comforting. Here, at last, are people who understand why you flinch every time someone shuffles a deck of cards, or why you instinctively eye the gravy boat for hidden property deeds. Strategies for recovery are swapped like war stories. We replaced game night with puzzles, no money, no winners, no one crying in the laundry room. We started a book club, but by chapter 3, half the group was just reading the Monopoly rulebook and plotting their return. A particularly brave soul suggests charades. which ends when someone tries to mime bankruptcy and everyone starts arguing about whether you can mortgage a pantomime property. There are setbacks, of course. Every support group has its relapses, secret games in the garage, late-night dice rolling under the covers, a neighborhood kid caught hawking homemade get-out-of-jail-free cards behind the schoolhouse. But the group offers solidarity. "It's not your fault," the leader says, patting a trembling hand. "This game was designed for chaos." Eventually, someone suggests a closing exercise. Write a letter to your former self, the one who thought Monopoly would bring the family closer together. The letters are poignant, filled with regrets. Never trust grandma with the bank. And lessons learned. No property is worth losing a friend, except maybe Boardwalk. The group laughs, cries, and agrees to meet again next week. Same time, same place. No tokens allowed. The meeting ends with a silent moment of reflection. A collective vow to pursue peace. And maybe canasta instead of high-stakes property carnage. As you leave, you notice someone slipping a hotel piece into their coat pocket, just in case. Because progress is slow, forgiveness is ongoing, and Boardwalk is always calling, but for tonight, you're one step closer to recovery. Eventually, the thimble goes missing. The car, the iron, the shoe, one by one, pieces vanish under mysterious circumstances. The board sits untouched for a week. Everyone claims ignorance. It always begins innocently enough. The Monopoly box, battered but beloved, sits on the shelf, its contents supposedly untouched. But as game night approaches, someone rifles through the box only to discover the thimble has vanished. Maybe it slipped behind the radiator. Maybe the dog ate it. Maybe it just had enough and left for greener pastures. A search party is launched. Couch cushions are overturned. The cat is interrogated, and Grandma offers a reward of 2 pink 20s for the safe return of her lucky token. The disappearance sparks suspicion. Mom swears she saw it last in Dad's jacket pocket. Dad swears he hasn't seen it since the great rent scandal of last Thursday. Aunt Ruth accuses your brother, who's always had a suspicious fondness for small, shiny objects. He denies everything, but his sudden generosity with extra hotels raises eyebrows. Conspiracy theories blossom. Was the thimble taken as an act of protest? A peace offering? Or is this an inside job, orchestrated by the banker to distract everyone from last week's missing 500s? You try to move on, replacing the thimble with a penny, a button, or a piece of dry macaroni. But it isn't the same. The penny gets lost. The button rolls away and is never seen again. The macaroni, predictably, is eaten by the dog, who now watches every board game with the hungry confidence of a seasoned opportunist. Each substitute is met with resistance. It just doesn't feel right. And soon, the other pieces start to follow the thimble's example. Next, the car disappears. This time, no one even pretends to search. The car was always the most coveted piece, the cause of countless arguments and at least one accidental cup of grape juice spilled on the board. Without the car, everyone feels a little lost, a little less competitive. The iron vanishes soon after, then the shoe, one by one. The original cast of tokens evaporates into family legend. Someone starts a tally on the fridge. Missing, thimble, car, iron, shoe, suspects. Everyone. The mood in the house shifts. Without all the tokens, Monopoly loses its magic. The board sits untouched for days. The silence is a relief at first, a welcome break from property disputes and the smell of slightly singed cardboard. The dog naps peacefully. The cat returns to her favorite chair, and Mom rediscovers her love for crossword puzzles. But the emptiness lingers. You find yourself glancing at the box every time you pass the shelf, wondering if the pieces will ever come home. After a week of silence, the family gathers for dinner, and the subject of game night inevitably arises. There's a strange nostalgia for the chaos, a wistful longing for the friendly warfare that only Monopoly can provide. Someone suggests using tokens from other games, a pawn, a risk cannon, a marble. Aunt Ruth offers to handcraft new pieces from old bottle caps and pipe cleaners. Grandpa, ever the traditionalist, holds a brief ceremony to honor the lost tokens, placing a candle in the center of the table and sharing stories of his best victories as the car. Then, in a twist worthy of any good family saga, the missing pieces begin to reappear. One hidden in the sofa, one buried in the dog's bed, one secreted away in the lining of Mom's purse. Each recovery is met with celebration, accusations, and the promise of another round. No one ever confesses. The mystery endures. Monopoly resumes, restored but forever changed. The thimble, now chipped, becomes a symbol of resilience, of mischief, of a family's refusal to let anything, even missing game pieces, keep them apart. For a while, everyone watches their tokens just a little more closely, because in the world of Monopoly, every piece matters. And sometimes, the greatest drama is what happens when one goes missing and when it finally comes home. After months of board game withdrawal, your family finds new routines. No one trusts each other, but at least there's less screaming. You rediscover small joys, like a quiet meal or a nap without dreaming about jail. At first it feels awkward, this sudden lull in competitive activity. The living room, once a battlefield of colored bills and wild accusations, now hums with a tentative peace. The Monopoly box, still missing at least one piece, or maybe several, no one's sure anymore, sits on the shelf, collecting a layer of dust and, perhaps, a little guilt. Breakfast is no longer a strategic planning meeting for evening game night. Instead, people actually talk about the weather, about chores, about anything that doesn't involve mortgaging property or the ethics of hiding cash in your sock. Grandpa takes up birdwatching. Aunt Ruth knits an endless scarf, muttering softly but no longer about unpaid rent. The family dog, relieved to be off the suspect list for game piece theft, naps with one eye open, just in case. The healing happens in subtle ways. You realize you haven't plotted anyone's economic ruin in at least a week. Dad goes a whole day without using the phrase, "that's just business." Someone mentions the color yellow, and for the first time, nobody flinches or demands a deed card. Mom reclaims her gravy boat, using it for actual gravy rather than as a temporary safe for pink 20s. Slowly, the living room regains its true purpose. A place to sit, to share a story, to doze off after a big meal. Small pleasures return. The family takes walks together, not as a means of escaping a heated argument, but because it's genuinely nice outside. You rediscover the joy of reading a book, undisturbed by dice clattering or the sharp intake of breath every time someone lands on boardwalk. Even the backyard becomes a sanctuary. No secret trades, no competitive gardening, just a picnic and the dog chasing butterflies instead of hotel tokens. There are setbacks, of course. Occasionally, someone will make a suspicious trade at the dinner table. "I'll give you my peas for your bread roll," and the room will tense for a second before laughter breaks out. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. There's still a bit of side-eye when Grandpa counts out his loose change, and any mention of rent is immediately met with exaggerated groans. But the edge is gone, replaced by a shared sense of relief. The wounds from Monopoly heal slowly. But they do heal, mostly. The absence of Monopoly doesn't leave a vacuum forever. Other, gentler games slip in to fill the gap. Dominoes, checkers, maybe a jigsaw puzzle if someone's feeling adventurous. There are no wild swings of fortune, no risk of losing your dignity or your spot on the couch over a bad roll. It's restful, almost boring, and nobody is sure whether to be grateful or bored stiff. The children ask, "Can we play Monopoly again?" and are met with a firm but gentle, maybe someday when we're older, or when the wounds aren't so fresh. And so the new normal emerges. Less chaos, more calm. The family, once united by rivalry and revenge, now discovers the quiet solidarity that comes from simply being together. No board, no banker, no thimble required. Meals end in laughter, not in board-flipping fury. Nights pass without secret side deals. Trust, that most fragile of family currencies, is painstakingly restored. Of course, somewhere deep down, you all know this peace can't last forever. Someday, someone will crack open that Monopoly box, blow the dust from the dice, and the familiar glint of competition will return. But for now, you savor the silence. You relish the absence of drama. You take comfort in the simple joys, a warm meal, an afternoon nap, and the knowledge that, at least tonight, no one is going to jail. For now, that's enough. And honestly, it might be everything. Just when you think you're out, Parker Brothers launches a new, improved version, brighter colors, shinier pieces, promises of friendlier rules. Resistance is futile. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like the family had escaped Monopoly's grasp. The board was retired, the pieces lost or repurposed. The rulebook, last seen propping up a wobbly table leg, mercifully forgotten. Then, one fateful afternoon, a glossy box appears in the front hall. It glows with a vibrancy previously reserved for Christmas mornings and the rare days when Grandma's pie cools without being pilfered. At first, everyone pretends not to notice. Dad examines the box like an unexploded bomb. Mom side-eyes it, muttering something about marketing men and their bright ideas. But the box is patient. It sits, alluring and innocent, promising a fresh start. The slogan, "Now with friendlier rules," beckons from the lid in bold, cheerful lettering. Next to it, cartoon tokens smile with the sinister energy of a wolf in a birthday hat. The children are the first to crack. "Look, it's got a penguin piece now," your sister squeals, and the dice are sparkly. Your brother, ever the negotiator, points out that the new edition includes short game instructions, as if Monopoly ever respected the concept of brevity. Even Grandpa, who once swore never to play again, gives the new, improved dog token a tentative poke. It isn't long before curiosity wins out. The family gathers around the table, the old wounds almost healed. The new rulebook is leafed through with wary optimism. "See?" Dad says. It says right here, "Play with kindness. No screaming." Everyone laughs. The laughter is nervous, but it's laughter nonetheless. Surely this time, things will be different. Surely this time, the game won't end in tears, suspicion, or a property card jammed in the toaster. The first roll of the sparkly dice is met with applause. The penguin token glides across the new, gleaming board. Properties are bought, rent is paid, and, for a single shining moment, it actually seems possible that the friendlier rules might work. The instructions recommend saying please and thank you when collecting rent. For half a round, everyone complies. Grandma says please so sweetly you almost forgive her for snatching Boardwalk out from under you. Almost. But Monopoly, like history, is doomed to repeat itself. The new tokens do nothing to curb old instincts. The friendlier rules are ignored the moment someone lands on a hotel-laden yellow set. "Sorry, not sorry," Aunt Ruth crows as she wipes out half the table. The short game instructions gather dust by the fruit bowl. The promise of a harmonious game night is as empty as the community chest after Grandpa's charity round. Slowly, the familiar patterns re-emerge. Someone accuses the penguin of suspicious activity. Mom slips into her banker persona, eyes narrowed, bills counted with military precision. Dad, swept up in the excitement, invents ultra-friendly mode, where the winner does all the dishes. It's a hard sell, but hope springs eternal. The children stage a revolt, declaring themselves the Penguin Party, and refusing to pay luxury tax. Alliances form, break, and reform over the gleaming new properties. Within the hour, the room is once again awash with Monopoly drama. The new pieces are just as likely to end up down the heating vent as the old ones. The dog resumes his post under the table, waiting for dropped dice and bits of dinner. Mom sighs, but she's smiling as she tallies up her earnings. Dad claims the new colors help him strategize better, though he's still the first to go bankrupt. In the end, the marketing men win. The box is brighter, the rules shinier, but the soul of Monopoly remains delightfully chaotic. The family, exhausted but happy, packs up the new set, already planning a rematch for next week. The scars of old games fade into stories, the lure of the new version too tempting to resist. Because in the end, it's not the pieces or the colors that make Monopoly a legend. It's the irresistible promise of another chance to win, lose, and love every infuriating minute of it. No matter how many times the marketing men improve the game, years later, you're still twitching at the sound of dice. Monopoly sets are quietly traded at garage sales, like forbidden contraband. Everyone claims they don't play anymore, but everyone is lying. Time passes, but the scars of Monopoly never truly fade. The family has grown older. The children who once wept over mortgaged railroads now roll their eyes at game night invitations. The board sits in the back of the closet, its edges softened with age, and perhaps the faintest smell of generational trauma. Every once in a while, you come across a stray green house in the junk drawer, or a faded pink 50 in the dog's bed, and you feel that familiar shiver, a Pavlovian response to the threat of bankruptcy. Garage sales become the new black market. There, amid old lamps and cracked teacups, Monopoly boxes change hands with all the secrecy of a speakeasy deal. No one advertises it outright. You just know. One neighbor sidles up, lowers their voice. "Hey, you got the version with the race car, the real metal one?" Another whispers, "Will you throw in the original rules? My cousin's visiting from out of town, and he thinks he can win." The transactions are swift, silent, and always end with a furtive glance over the shoulder to see if Aunt Ruth is lurking in the hydrangeas. At family gatherings, Monopoly is the subject that dare not speak its name. If the word slips out in conversation, maybe a joke about passing, go at the buffet, or a complaint about rent on the guest bedroom, everyone stiffens. The stories are there, just below the surface. You all remember the great Thanksgiving meltdown of 31, the time Grandma tried to bribe the banker with leftover pie. Or that fateful night, someone accidentally vacuumed up Boardwalk. But even as you claim to have moved on, the symptoms linger. The sound of dice rolling on a hardwood floor makes you tense up, ready to defend your stack of pink bills with your life. You catch yourself sizing up your friends' properties during a stroll through the neighborhood, estimating rent, calculating hypothetical mortgages. At work, you glance at your boss's desk, half expecting to find a hotel perched on the stapler and a tiny thimble by the phone. No one plays anymore, or so they say. "It's too stressful," Grandpa claims, rubbing his temples at the mere mention. "We're a Scrabble family now," Aunt Ruth insists, though you've seen her practicing Monopoly strategy in the pantry late at night. The Monopoly box stays hidden, tucked away with the family secrets. But every so often someone dusts it off, just to check for missing pieces. The next generation isn't immune. The children find the box and beg for a game. The adults share a collective flashback, faces drained of color. "Maybe another time," they mumble. "Let's play something peaceful, like Twister." Even the dog, now graying around the muzzle, growls at the sight of the iron token. No one trusts the cat, who was always suspiciously lucky with chance cards. But the truth is, deep down, you all miss it. The drama, the competition, the sweet taste of revenge on Street James Place. The shared trauma becomes a kind of family folklore, retold at reunions with a wink and a sigh. You remember the highs, the lows, the time Uncle Frank tried to declare bankruptcy and claim diplomatic immunity. Monopoly may be packed away, but it lives on in jokes, rivalries, and a certain wary respect for the cousin who never lost a game. Years later, you're still haunted, but also a little proud. Monopoly left its mark. A little chaos, a lot of laughter, and memories you wouldn't trade for all the hotels on Boardwalk. And who knows? One of these days, someone will crack, the board will come back out, and you'll all remember exactly why you never stopped playing even when you said you did. Because Monopoly, like any great addiction, never really leaves you. It just hides in the closet, waiting for the right role. Looking back, you realize Monopoly taught you everything you need to know about capitalism, betrayal, and why your uncle can't be trusted with the bank. It wasn't just a game, it was an education. Monopoly's box may be faded and its tokens a little dented, but its true value is measured in life lessons, most of which are better learned at the kitchen table than in any classroom. Every heated roll, every sly trade, every lost friendship over Baltic Avenue. Together, they forged a curriculum in human behavior, finance, and why your own kin are the most dangerous competitors of all. First, let's talk about capitalism. The game is a crash course in economics, teaching you the true meaning of words like liquidation and asset seizure. Forget what they told you in school about supply and demand. Monopoly shows you how markets really work. If you control all the oranges, you control the family's destiny. You learn the value of a good investment, the folly of sinking your life savings into Baltic Avenue, and the way fortunes can swing with a single roll. The phrase cash flow stops being theoretical when you're down to your last $10 and mortgaging Vermont Avenue to keep the dream alive. Then there's betrayal. Oh, the betrayal. No matter how many times you promise not to turn on each other, Monopoly turns the sweetest cousin into a ruthless real estate shark. Alliances form and dissolve with alarming speed. You learn to read faces, to listen for hesitation in someone's voice, to never trust a handshake over a deal for Park Place. Trust is a luxury few can afford. Every smile hides a scheme. It's not paranoia if the whole family is out to get you. Banking, too, is an education all its own. Trustworthy Uncle Bob was always eager to count out everyone's money, but you soon realized his pockets jingled suspiciously every time he stood up. As banker, he'd make change with one hand and slip a 50 to himself with the other, all while keeping up a stream of friendly banter. You learn to demand audits, count your money twice, and never let your guard down, even, or especially, when blood relatives are in charge. But perhaps the biggest lesson Monopoly teaches is about family itself. You come to understand how thin the line is between friendly competition and all-out psychological warfare. Every session is a study in conflict resolution. Arguments flare, tears are shed, chairs are pushed back in protest. Yet somehow, you always circle back to the table. You learn the fine art of apologizing, sometimes with sincerity, sometimes just to keep the peace. You master the skill of holding grudges for exactly the right amount of time before the next game begins. Monopoly is also a masterclass in negotiation. Who knew you could trade 3 greenhouses and a get-out-of-jail-free card for 5 minutes of quiet from your little sister? Or that offering free rent for 1 turn could buy you enough time to survive until the next roll? You hone your poker face, your bargaining skills, your ability to keep a straight face while plotting absolute devastation behind a facade of just having fun. And finally, Monopoly reveals the raw, unfiltered truth. Family is complicated. These are the people who know how to push your buttons, but also the ones who will make you laugh until your stomach hurts when the game inevitably falls apart. You'll never trust Uncle Bob with the bank again, but you'll also never forget the sound of everyone's laughter echoing around the table as the game, and your dignity crumbles. So, yes, Monopoly taught you more about life than you ever wanted to know, about capitalism and chaos, betrayal and forgiveness, and the kind of stubborn, ridiculous love that brings a family back to the board again and again. Because in the end, that's the real lesson. It was never just a game. It was family, at its most honest, chaotic, and absurd. And you wouldn't have it any other way. In the end, you made it out. Mostly intact, mostly still speaking. Your family may be scarred, but they're bonded by shared trauma and inside jokes about Baltic Avenue. You light a candle, whisper a prayer, and thank fate that you never landed on Marvin Gardens. The dust has settled. The Monopoly board, with all its dog-eared deeds and occasionally bite-marked tokens, is finally packed away, at least for now. Sunlight creeps into the living room, filtering through the window with the soft, forgiving glow of peacetime after a long and exhausting war. You look around and see your family as they are now. A little older, a lot wiser, and somehow still capable of sharing a meal without a debate about property tax or how much rent you owe for the mashed potatoes. You survived. Not just the game, but each other. In the process, you discovered that the real secret to Monopoly was never about who could amass the most hotels or bankrupt the most cousins. It was about surviving the experience with your relationships and sense of humor mostly intact. The memories you carry aren't just of property empires and brutal bankruptcies, but of nights spent laughing, bickering, and finding out just how far Aunt Ruth would go to avoid paying luxury tax. There's a peculiar magic in the shared suffering of family game night. It's the reason you all remember exactly who pulled off the great boardwalk heist of '29, or why Dad is still forbidden from ever being the banker. The stories have turned into family folklore, retold at every reunion and holiday gathering, growing a little more dramatic with each retelling. No one really knows how the cat ended up with 3 hotels, but it's become tradition to pretend you do. You learn, over time, that Monopoly was the crucible in which your family's character was forged, where alliances were made and broken, and forgiveness learned the hard way. Those bruised egos and lingering vendettas? They faded, replaced by a deep appreciation for the ridiculousness of it all. You watch as siblings, once rivals, now team up to tease their parents about that time Mom mortgaged the house to save Baltic Avenue. Even the youngest, who once cried over a lost railroad, now joins in the laughter, proud of their place in the family saga. It turns out that the real prize for surviving Monopoly isn't a stack of pink hundreds or a plastic hotel empire. It's something quieter, sturdier, the knowledge that, even after the wildest nights and the fiercest arguments, you can all sit together, scarred but smiling, cracked but never quite broken. Monopoly teaches you to let go, to laugh at yourself, and to remember that everyone is a sore loser sometimes, especially Grandpa, who's still salty about the thimble incident. The inside jokes become glue. Remember Marvin Gardens? Is enough to send everyone into fits of laughter, even if no one can quite recall why it was so funny at the time. You develop a shorthand for forgiveness, a plate of cookies, a silly apology, a new house rule that lets Grandma start with an extra 50 just for showing up. The game becomes a backdrop for something greater. The story of a family that played, lost, won, and grew closer in the process. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in, grateful for a quiet house, indoor plumbing, and the absence of property auctions, take a moment to honor your family's resilience. You played the game, you paid the rent, you learned to survive each other, one roll at a time. And that, in the end, makes you all the real winners. Even if you never did figure out who kept hiding the iron in the butter dish. It turns out there are unwritten laws more sacred than the actual game rules. No eating the play money, no biting the thimble, Absolutely no flipping the board, unless it's Thanksgiving, and then, well, accidents happen. The true test of etiquette is whether you can resist gloating when you bankrupt your favorite cousin, or whether you simply invent a new, louder laugh just for the occasion. Every family that plays Monopoly has a set of rules you'll never find printed in the Parker Brothers booklet, but break them at your own peril. These are the social contracts of the living room, passed down through generations, quietly enforced with a raised eyebrow or a sudden, icy silence. And if you ever wonder how civilization survived the age of board games, it's because of these sacred, unspoken codes. The first and greatest law: respect the banker. The banker's desk may be a wobbly TV tray or a suspiciously sticky corner of the table, but when the bills are doled out, you say thank you. You do not count the bills twice. And you never, ever accuse the banker of skimming off the top unless you have irrefutable proof or a death wish. It's also understood that the banker's snack bowl is off limits. Only a true monster helps themselves to the banker's snacks. Then comes token decorum. Everyone has a favorite token. Choosing is a solemn ritual, sometimes determined by age, seniority, or who called dibs first. You never switch tokens mid-game, not even for the puppy dog eyes of a little sibling. And you certainly don't accidentally hide a rival's token when they go to the bathroom. The only exception is when the cat decides to nap on the board, at which point all bets are off. Trading etiquette is an art unto itself. Deals must be struck in good faith, or at least the appearance of good faith. You don't dangle Marvin Gardens in front of your little brother just to watch him sweat, unless you're prepared for revenge at bedtime. Side deals under the table are tolerated, but not respected, and the moment you start bundling, offering free rent for a week plus homemade cookies, you've entered the wild frontier of negotiation, where etiquette may briefly go missing. When it comes to gloating and taunting, the rules are strict but frequently ignored. Small victories can be celebrated. A gentle good game here, a discreet smirk there. But outright victory laps, table pounding, or dramatic readings of property deeds are considered poor form. That being said, family tradition allows for one, and only one, triumphant just business per game, provided you're willing to be on dish duty for the rest of the week. Of course, dispute resolution is an entire field of etiquette. The oldest sibling usually gets the final word, unless grandma is playing, in which case she's the supreme court. All rulebook consults must be done in good faith, and anyone caught editing the rules with a crayon is automatically exiled to the porch for the next round. Yelling is permitted, but only at the dice, and only if you roll snake eyes. Then there are the tokens of peace. If a game gets too heated, etiquette demands an immediate snack break. Cookies have the power to erase even the gravest Monopoly sins. If things really spiral, it's customary to end the game early, pack up the board, and pretend you were planning to play charades all along. And finally, the ultimate rule: forgive and forget until next game night. Old grudges are left at the table. No one brings up the great utility scandal of 1928 during Sunday dinner, at least not until dessert. In the world of Monopoly, the written rules might keep the game moving, but it's the unwritten ones that keep the family together. So next time you bankrupt your cousin, do it with grace, a small smile, a silent nod, and above all, no biting the thimble. You didn't realize Monopoly was a team sport until your siblings start trading secrets, IOUs, and cookies under the table. Two kids unite against Aunt Ethel, who's become an unchecked real estate baron. Secret alliances form and dissolve faster than Prohibition bootleggers. And suddenly someone is trying to pawn your lunch for one measly railroad. Monopoly, it turns out, is less a game of individual conquest and more a high-stakes exercise in shifting loyalty and opportunistic backroom deals. It starts innocently, a whispered suggestion from across the board, a quick wink between siblings, and suddenly there's a subtle understanding. Aunt Ethel is on a rampage. snapping up properties left and right, and someone needs to stop her. Preferably someone willing to swap a chocolate chip cookie for Pacific Avenue. Alliances form on the fly. You and your little brother pool your modest resources, your stash of low-value properties and his disturbingly large supply of animal crackers, into a mutual defense pact. If I land on your yellow set, you let me pass. In return, I won't charge rent when you hit my railroad. And if Aunt Ethel asks, we were never here. Sibling oaths are sworn, pinky promises exchanged, and a small pile of IOUs accumulates under the table, written in crayon and enforceable only until someone finds a better offer. No alliance lasts forever. The moment someone lands on a cash cow or a lucrative trade appears, the backstabbing begins. Your little brother, previously your staunchest ally, offers your utility property to Aunt Ethel for half a cookie and diplomatic immunity. You retaliate by refusing to let him use your get-out-of-jail-free card, and the Great Brother-Sister Treaty of 1929 is torn up before it's even dry. You realize that every member of the family has developed their own side hustle. Your cousin starts a banking service, lending out $5 bills at interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. Aunt Ruth, always on the lookout for an angle, begins a brisk trade in snacks for rent forgiveness. Soon half the table owes her chocolate chips and 2 carrot sticks. The youngest cousin, barely old enough to count, builds a small empire trading stickers for property swaps and eventually winds up holding more assets than the actual bank. Deals aren't limited to the official currency. Cookies, chores, and even the rights to choose the next board game are suddenly in play. You overhear your sister negotiating an eternal truce with Grandpa. She'll do his dishes for a week if he lets her have Park Place. Grandpa, no fool, counters with a demand for 3 helpings of dessert and a foot massage. The transaction is sealed with a handshake, a slice of pie, and a discreet "don't tell your mother." Even the family dog gets in on the action. He becomes the unofficial neutral party, courier of secret notes, recipient of bribes, and occasionally a stand-in for the thimble when negotiations get heated. One fateful night, you catch him trotting away with a pink 50 and a property card in his collar. No one asks questions. Some deals are better left unexamined. Of course, as alliances shift, chaos ensues. You find yourself caught between rival factions, unsure who to trust. Aunt Ethel forms a temporary truce with Aunt Ruth, promising shared custody of Boardwalk in exchange for veto power over house rules. The rest of the table, sensing danger, forms an uneasy coalition of the outnumbered and the desperate. By the end of the night, the alliances have crumbled, the cookies are gone, and everyone's trust is as fractured as the Monopoly board's cardboard fold. Still, you marvel at the ingenuity. Monopoly didn't just teach you about property management. It taught you the art of the deal, the thrill of double-crossing your siblings, and the cold satisfaction of pawning your lunch for a railroad. As the dust settles, you realize one unspoken truth. Monopoly may end, but the side hustles and sibling alliances last a lifetime, or at least until dessert. Every square on the board holds a memory. Some sweet, most sour. You can't land on Reading Railroad without remembering that fateful Christmas of 28, when Grandpa swore he'd never play again. Spoiler, he played the next day. Marvin Gardens becomes a war zone. Baltic Avenue is forever cursed. And Park Place is where family alliances go to die. Monopoly boards everywhere are stained not just with spilled cocoa and greasy fingerprints, but with decades of emotional baggage. These colored squares aren't just properties, they're family history, preserved in pastel. Every time someone slams a token onto a space, it's a reminder of betrayals past, victories snatched away, and deals gone sideways. You can't pass go without someone muttering about the incident of 27, when 2 aunts broke their Cold War with a single, ill-advised property swap. Take Baltic Avenue, the board's perpetual underdog. In your family, it's less an investment and more a curse. Whoever owns Baltic is doomed to land on every hotel from Street, Charles Place to Boardwalk, losing money faster than you can say mortgage. Your cousin once built an empire on Baltic alone, but the gloating was so unbearable. The space has since been unofficially blacklisted. Landing there now is met with solemn nods and the occasional "I'll pray for you." Marvin Gardens is a different story. It's a war zone, a perpetual flashpoint for grudges. One year, Aunt Ruth traded it to Uncle Frank for future considerations, and an IOU scribbled on a napkin. Frank promptly turned it into a fortress of hotels and bankrupted 3 generations of cousins before dessert. Since then, Marvin Gardens is where promises go to die. No one lands there without side-eyeing the entire room, mentally tallying old scores and calculating the odds of payback. Park Place and Boardwalk? These aren't just properties, they're battlegrounds for the family's deepest, pettiest rivalries. The blue spaces have hosted more standoffs than a Prohibition speakeasy. Whoever gets Boardwalk is instantly marked for collective sabotage. Alliances form, trades are blocked, and every roll is met with theatrical suspense. The moment someone completes the blue set, the tension is so thick you could cut it with the iron token if it hadn't been mysteriously lost last summer. Reading Railroad, on any other board, just another stop. In your family, it's the site of Grandpa's legendary meltdown, when he mortgaged everything for the dream of railroad domination, only to go bankrupt 2 turns later. The phrase, "don't go all in on Reading," is now family shorthand for any risky, ill-advised decision. Double desserts, buying a used car, dating someone with a motorcycle. Then there are the smaller but equally haunted spaces. Chance. Forever associated with the time Mom drew 3 go-to-jail cards in a row and started questioning fate itself. Luxury tax, which Uncle Bob once declared socialism in action before refusing to pay and storming out. Free parking, hotly contested every time, the site of more than one creative interpretation of the rules. The board, over time, becomes less a game and more a living map, part cautionary tale, part memorial. Every game is a tour through family history, laughter, shouting, grudges, forgiveness, and the sweet satisfaction of sending a nemesis to jail. Even the tokens have stories. Why the thimble is considered lucky, why the dog is banned for unsportsmanlike conduct, why the race car never finishes a game. As you grow older, you realize that Monopoly wasn't just about play money or fake property. It was about the memories, the grudges, and the tangled web of family alliances that somehow survive year after year. Each square on the board is a stop on the grand tour of your family's story, full of ghosts, inside jokes, and the stubborn hope that next time things might turn out differently. But deep down, you know the truth. The grudges will linger, the stories will grow, and the board will always be ready for one more round. And so, as the final echoes of jazz fade, the dice grow still, and the Monopoly board is packed away for another week or another decade. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've survived tonight. You've endured ruthless property tycoons, midnight rule disputes, and the kind of family alliances that would put medieval royalty to shame. You've watched as fortunes rose and fell faster than you can say community chest. And somehow, you made it through without flipping the table. Well, at least not every time. If history teaches us anything, it's that people are endlessly creative when it comes to filling the void left by one addiction with something even more absurd. The 1920s gave us jazz, bathtub gin, and a family board game that nearly drove a nation to madness. And, in the process, accidentally taught us everything we need to know about capitalism, competition, and the dangers of leaving your sister in charge of the bank. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a real bed, a bed without straw mattresses, barnyard smells, or Monopoly money hiding in the sheets, maybe spare a thought for your ancestors. The ones who survived Flappers, Prohibition, Family Game Night, and an economy so unhinged it made betting on Baltic Avenue look sensible. History may be messy, petty, and occasionally full of questionable house rules, but it's also proof that families endure. Sometimes by yelling, sometimes by laughing, and sometimes by quietly plotting revenge with a shoe token and a stack of pastel bills. Rest easy knowing that, unlike your 1920s counterpart, you're not about to be woken at 3 a.m. for just one more game. You have indoor plumbing, working Wi-Fi, and a blessed lack of property taxes on your pillow. Maybe, as you drift off, whisper a little thanks to the universe for sleep, peace, and a world where family drama is only ever one game away from laughter. Because, after all, surviving the night, then and now, is a victory all its own. Sweet dreams, and may all your rolls be double sixes. Good night.